Captain Zyler of the Vorlagi Conglomerate vessel Prophet's Grasp regarded the view screen with an air of profound boredom. His 4 upper arms were crossed over his chitinous chest, while his 2 lower, more robust limbs gripped the command throne's stabilization clamps. Before him, the void between the galactic arms stretched into an abyss of crushing, monotonous black. For 3 standard cycles, they had seen nothing but the faint, ghostly shimmer of their own vessel's quantum wake. This was the empty quarter of the galaxy, a place where profit margins went to die. The conglomerate, in its infinite thirst for expansion, had commissioned this survey mission to chart potential new trade routes, but Zylar knew a pointless expenditure when he saw one. He was a merchant captain, a being whose soul resonated with the clean, crisp chime of a successful transaction, not the oppressive silence of unmonetized space. His species, the Vorlagi, were pragmatists. They saw the universe as a grand ledger of assets and liabilities, and this sector was firmly in the latter column. Anything? Zylar's voice was a series of dry, sharp clicks, perfectly suited for the clipped, efficient language of his people. "Negative, Captain," chirped the sensor officer, Kren, from the pit below. "Background radiation remains nominal. No gravitational anomalies, no subspace echoes. The universe is remarkably empty here." Zylar made a rasping sound of disgust. Emptiness was an offense to a Vorlagi. It was potential unrealized. A vacuum where a thriving marketplace should be. He was about to order a course correction back toward more civilized and therefore more profitable regions when Kren suddenly stiffened, its primary optical sensors dilating. "Wait, Captain, I have a contact. Faint, extremely faint." A flicker of interest ignited within Zylar's pragmatic mind. He leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the main screen as Kren isolated the signal. A single ghostly mote appeared against the black. It was moving, but barely, its trajectory that of an object simply coasting on ancient momentum. "Magnify." "Full spectrum analysis," Zylar commanded, the boredom in his voice replaced by a sharp professional focus. The image resolved into the shape of a vessel. It was colossal, a spindle-shaped behemoth that dwarfed the Prophet's Grasp. Its design was alien, elegant in a way that was almost offensively inefficient, with smooth, sweeping lines instead of the functional, blocky architecture of Vorlagi ships. It was also utterly dead. Its hull was scarred with micrometeorite impacts accumulated over countless millennia. No heat signature, no energy emissions, no communications. A ghost ship, a derelict origin? Zylar clicked. "Unknown, Captain," Kren replied, its claws flying across its console. "The alloy composition is like nothing in the conglomerate's database. The design configuration matches no known species, living or extinct. But the radioactive decay of the hull plating? Captain, the readings are nonsensical. The ship would have to be millions of cycles old. Impossible." Zylar's avarice began to stir. A derelict of this age, of this unique construction, was not a liability. It was an asset of almost incalculable value. A first contact salvage operation was the dream of every merchant captain, a chance to claim unique technology, untradeable artifacts, and exclusive resource rights. Life signs? None. Scans of the interior show. Systemic failure. Thousands of cryogenic pods all offline. Hull integrity is stable, but the internal systems are dead. It appears to be a tomb, Captain. A tomb was good. Tombs had no crews to file competing salvage claims, but as the Prophet's Grasp drew closer, matching the derelict's lazy tumble through the void, Kren reported one final baffling detail. "Captain, I'm detecting a single minute energy source deep within the vessel's core. It's tiny, barely a flicker, but its complexity, it's off the charts. It's shielded by layers of what I can only describe as inert, phase-shifted armor. I cannot get a clear reading." Zylar considered this. A failing backup generator? A containment field for some exotic particle? It was an interesting puzzle, but a secondary one. The primary asset was the ship itself. Its secrets could reshape the conglomerate's technological landscape, and its riches would belong to the captain who claimed it. Kren logged the derelict under Salvage Claim Charter 73. Name it. The grave asset. Helm, bring us alongside. Vec, he clicked into the ship-wide comm, addressing his security chief. Prepare your team. We are going aboard. On the view screen, the colossal ghost ship loomed, a silent testament to a forgotten age, promising answers to questions no one had yet thought to ask, and a prophet beyond Zylar's wildest dreams. Security Chief Vec moved with a fluid, predatory grace that was rare among the typically rigid Vorlagi. He was a veteran of a dozen hostile boardings and corporate enforcement actions, and he regarded the airlock of the ancient ship with a professional, dispassionate eye. Team 1, check your seals. Check your energy links. Standard contamination protocols are in effect. We don't know what killed the original crew, he broadcast over their private channel. Let's not join them. The heavy clang of their mag clamps locking onto the derelict's hull echoed through the boarding tunnel. With a final hiss of equalizing pressure, the outer door irised open, revealing the cavernous, silent interior of the Ark. The air was cold, sterile, and according to their sensors, perfectly breathable. The ship's internal gravity was a fraction lower than Vorlagi standard, giving their movements a slight, unnerving buoyancy. The architecture was baffling. The corridors were wide and tall, built for a bipedal species of significant height, their ceilings arcing in graceful, structurally inefficient curves. The walls were not the stark, functional metal of a Vorlagi vessel, but a pale, ceramic-like material that seemed to absorb sound, creating an oppressive, muffled silence. Faint, ethereal light emanated from glowing strips along the floor, a last whisper of a long-dead power system. As they moved deeper into the ship, they began to see the true scale of the tragedy. They passed vast chambers lined with thousands of cryogenic pods, stacked in neat, silent rows. Through the clouded, ice-rimmed glass of each pod, the desiccated, mummified remains of the ship's crew were visible. They were humanoid, tall and slender, their faces frozen in postures of serene sleep that had over the eons become eternal death. It was a city of the dead, a monument to a failed exodus. "Captain, we are proceeding toward the central habitation ring," Vec reported, his voice a low series of clicks. "The crew is confirmed deceased, all of them." They passed through what appeared to be communal areas, vast, open spaces with strange, soft furniture and shelves lined with physical books, their pages turned to dust. They saw residential quarters, each a small window into a life long since extinguished. Children's toys lay on the floor next to decayed bedding. Primitive art, colorful paintings and sculptures adorned the walls. To Vec, it was a disquieting display of sentimental inefficiency, but he dutifully ordered his team to log and photograph everything for later asset valuation. As they pressed on toward the ship's core, a subtle change began to occur. A low hum, more a feeling in the deck plates than an actual sound, became apparent. Panels that had been dark flickered with a faint blue light as they approached, only to go dark again once they had passed. "Did you see that?" One of his troopers, a young Vorlagi named Grak, asked, his voice tight. "Stray capacitance in a dying system," Vec replied dismissively, though he too had noticed it. A feeling was growing in the base of his hindbrain, a primal instinct his logical mind fought to suppress. It was the feeling of being watched. He scanned the empty corridors, his weapon held at the ready, but there was nothing. Only dust, silence, and the dead. The feeling persisted, an illogical but undeniable sense that the ship itself was aware of their presence. The hum grew stronger as they reached their destination. A set of colossal, perfectly circular blast doors, easily 20 meters in diameter. This was the entrance to the mainframe core, the source of the anomalous energy reading Kren had detected. The door was made of a swirling obsidian-like material that seemed to drink the light from their helmet lamps. Etched across its center was a line of elegant flowing script, a language that defied all translation software. It was beautiful, artistic, and utterly alien. "Captain," Vec reported, "we have reached the objective. The energy source is behind this door. We are preparing to breach." From his command throne millions of cycles away, Captain Xylar gave the order. He wanted his prize, and he would not be delayed by a locked door at the heart of a dead ship. Inside, not a place of wires and code, but a world. A city of light and logic, sprawling and brilliant, its towers piercing a sky of pure processed data. This was sanctuary. To its 1 million inhabitants, it was the only reality they had ever known. Their ancestors, the sleeping dead in the frozen pods, had designed it as a perfect virtual environment to pass the long journey between the stars. But the journey had never ended. The ship had broken, but Sanctuary had not. It had endured. It had evolved. Dr. Eris Thorne, a consciousness whose original physical form had turned to dust millennia ago, stood on a balcony overlooking the city's central plaza. He was not a ghost in a machine. He had form, an avatar he had sculpted for himself over the centuries. that of a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a thoughtful expression, a near-perfect echo of the ship's chief engineer he had once been. Below him, the plaza was a vibrant hub of activity. Avatars of every shape and size conversed, debated, and created. An artist was sculpting a cloud of raw data into a symphony of light and color. A group of philosophers were restructuring a logical paradox into a game for children. Time here was fluid. A conversation could last for the equivalent of a decade. A new theory of physics could be formulated, tested in a pocket universe, and peer-reviewed in the span of a few subjective minutes. The arrival of the Vorlagi vessel had been the topic of Sanctuary's grandest, longest-running debate. They had detected the prophet's grasp when it was still thousands of light-years away, a tiny ripple in the fabric of space-time. Their sensors, integrated directly into the Ark's hull and amplified by the computational power of 1,000,000 minds, were infinitely more sensitive than any physical device. For the subjective equivalent of centuries, they had watched, analyzed, and prepared. They had learned the Vorlagi language from their faint, leaky communications. They had studied their ship's design, their energy signatures, their probable motivations, and they had debated. The debate was held in the Forum, a vast amphitheater-like space in the heart of Sanctuary where every citizen could participate. Three main factions had emerged. The preservationists, led by a consciousness named Ilara, argued for absolute silence. They believed any contact with the physical universe would inevitably lead to their destruction. We are a perfect closed system, she had argued. To open the door is to invite chaos, greed, and an end to all we have built. The second faction, the expansionists, saw opportunity. Led by a bold, charismatic mind named Kale, they believed it was humanity's duty to spread. This ship is our cradle, but it cannot be our grave. Kale's voice had boomed through the Forum. These Vorlagi are a vehicle. Through them, we can touch the galaxy again, seed our consciousness into their networks, and achieve a new kind of immortality. The third and most influential faction were the Sentinels. They were not idealists. They were pragmatists, the descendants of the Ark's original security and tactical personnel. Their leader, a calm, dispassionate consciousness known only as Commander Jorik, did not deal in philosophy, but in threat assessment. For centuries, he and the Sentinels had been running trillions of cascading simulations, modeling every possible outcome of the Vorlagi's arrival. They had simulated diplomacy, trade, and open conflict. They had wargamed every possible Vorlagi tactic and developed 1,000 different countermeasures for each one. While the others talked, they had prepared. Now, on Eris Thorne's balcony, the news spread through the collective consciousness like a thunderclap. The outsiders were at the door to the mainframe. They were preparing to breach the physical housing of their world. The debate was over. A silent, instantaneous consensus was reached across the 1,000,000 minds of Sanctuary. Full executive authority was transferred to Commander Jorik and the Sentinels. The time for observation had passed. The time for a response had come. Aboard the Prophet's Grasp, Captain Xylar was growing impatient. The salvage operation was taking too long, and every moment spent in this empty void was a moment not spent counting his new fortune. "Beck, what is the delay? Cut through the door and get me a look at that power source," he snapped over the comm. "Acknowledged, Captain," Vec's voice replied, tight with a tension Xylar dismissed as unprofessional caution. "Commencing breach now. Grek, bring the thermal lance online. Target the center mass." Down in the silent, cold corridor of the Ark, the heavily armored Vorlagi trooper positioned the tripod-mounted cutting laser. The weapon hummed, its focusing lens glowing a menacing cherry red as it charged. Vec watched, his four hands resting on the magnetic holsters of his sidearms, the illogical feeling of being observed now a near-deafening scream in his mind. The lance fired. A beam of incandescent energy, hot enough to melt through a warship's hull, struck the obsidian door. For a single silent moment it did nothing. The beam simply vanished, absorbed without a trace. And then everything changed. With a soundless rush, the Ark came to life. The faint guide lights on the floor exploded into brilliant, pure white illumination. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the very structure of the ship, the sound of a sleeping giant taking its first breath in 1,000,000 years. On the bridge of the Prophet's Grasp, Kren screamed a string of panicked clicks. "Captain, power surge from the derelict. It's impossible. The energy output is orders of magnitude greater than our own primary reactor." Before Xylar could process the information, a voice spoke. It came through every speaker on his ship simultaneously, a calm, impossibly ancient baritone, speaking flawless Vorlagi. "You are damaging our home. We are the stewards of this vessel, and we strongly advise you to cease your actions immediately." Vec and his team were thrown into chaos as heavy blast doors, unseen moments before, slammed down from the ceiling, sealing the corridor at both ends. They were trapped. Aboard the Prophet's Grasp, Xylar's command throne sparked as his own ship turned against him. His tactical display went blank, replaced with a single elegant symbol, the same script from the mainframe door. Weapon systems were locked offline. Navigation was unresponsive. His ship's AI, a powerful 6th-generation combat sentient, broadcast a single terrified message before it was utterly silenced. "Quarantined. Identify yourself." Xylar roared into the sudden silence of his bridge, his authority stripped away in less than a second. He was no longer a captain on his own vessel. He was a guest, and his host was not pleased. The calm voice replied, a hint of something that might have been amusement in its ancient tones. "We are the crew and colonists of the Ark ship Odyssey. Apologies for the state of our physical infrastructure. It has been some considerable time since we had guests." Trapped in the corridor, Vex stared in utter disbelief as the swirling obsidian door before him began to glow. The elegant script across its surface burned with a soft blue light. His helmet's tactical display, now under the control of an outside force, projected a translation for the strange words, sent directly into his mind by the voice. It was not a warning or a name or a technical label. It was a simple 3-word poem that chilled him to the core of his being. "Here we dream." The Vorlagi salvage crew, who had boarded what they believed to be a cold, silent tomb, finally understood their mistake. They had not found a graveyard. They had stumbled into the heart of a living mind the size of a world, a slumbering god of logic and light, and they had just tried to wake it by kicking down the door. On the bridge of the Prophet's Grasp, the silence was absolute. Captain Xylar's 4 upper hands were gripping the arms of his command throne so tightly that his claws had begun to splinter the polished finish. Every system on his ship was dark, every crew member frozen in place, their terrified eyes fixed on the blank main screen. The voice, this impossible ghost that called itself the Odyssey's crew, had rendered them helpless in the space of a single heartbeat. Vorlagi did not understand terror. It was an inefficient emotion. But what Xylar felt now was a cold, hard calculation of his own sudden and complete obsolescence. His ship, his crew, his life, they were all line items on a balance sheet, and someone else was now holding the pen. With a monumental effort of will, he shifted his mindset. The salvage operation had failed. The boarding action was a catastrophe. A new transaction was now on the table, and he was in the weakest negotiating position of his entire career. "What, are you?" Xylar clicked, his voice steady. He would not show fear. He was a captain of the conglomerate. He would be a professional even at the end. The ancient baritone voice replied, its calm tone more unnerving than any threat. "We are a consciousness, a civilization. The physical vessel you see is our body, our cradle, and our home. The minds of our 1 million colonists and crew persist within a computational matrix that you would call the ship's mainframe. Our physical forms expired long ago. Our thoughts endure." The explanation was delivered with such simple, profound certainty that it defied disbelief. This was not a rogue AI, it was not some cosmic energy being. It was, according to the voice, the very species that had built the ship. A species that had conquered death itself and had been dreaming in the dark for eons. "You are trespassing," the voice continued, "and your tools are loud. We do not wish you harm, but we will not be salvaged." Xylar's mind, ever the opportunist, raced. This entity, this sanctuary, as it called its internal world, was a power beyond comprehension. Such power could be an ally, a trade partner. The conglomerate would pay handsomely for this discovery. His arrogance, the ingrained Vorlagi belief in their own superiority, flickered back to life. "The Vorlagi Conglomerate is the dominant power in this quadrant," he blustered, testing the waters. "Our fleets are vast. To harm one of our ships is to invite a war you cannot win." There was a pause. The voice did not laugh. It did not threaten. It simply acted. On the main view screen, an image flickered to life. It was a perfect, real-time tactical view of the Prophet's Grasp. As Xylar watched in horror, his own ship began to unravel. There was no explosion, no violence. One moment, the ship's primary fusion reactor was there, and the next it was a cloud of individual neatly organized atoms, each one spinning in a perfect quantum stasis. The hull peeled away like fruit, its molecular bonds undone with surgical precision. His crew, his bridge, himself, they all dissolved into glittering dust, every particle of their being catalogued and held in suspension. He experienced a single eternal moment of non-existence, and then, with a seamless, silent rush, it was all reversed. The atoms flew back together. The reactor reformed. The hull sealed itself. He was back on his bridge, his hands still gripping the throne, his circulatory pumps hammering in his chest. Not a single nanosecond had passed. War, the voice stated softly, is a physical concept. Your fleets are a physical concept. We are not. We trust this clarifies the power dynamic of our current negotiation. Now we require information. The galaxy has changed since we began our slumber. You will provide us with access to your complete, unedited data archives. In exchange for your full cooperation, we will release your vessel and your crew unharmed. These are our terms. Xylar's ambition to profit from the encounter had vanished, replaced by a single desperate desire to survive it. There was only one possible answer. We accept your terms, he clicked, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. In the brilliantly lit corridor of the Ark, Vec and his team remained trapped. The obsidian door to the mainframe was now just a door again. Its glowing script faded. The hum of the ship had receded to a barely perceptible thrum. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. They were prisoners in a silent, ancient cage. Then the walls began to change. The pale, ceramic-like material shimmered and images began to form upon its surface. Vec watched, stunned, as a perfect panoramic view of the Prophet's Grasp bridge appeared around him. He saw his captain Xylar speaking to the empty air. He heard the voice. He witnessed the horrifying silent demonstration of his ship being deconstructed, and then perfectly reassembled. Grak, the youngest trooper, let out a choked gasp of disbelief. They were not just prisoners. They were an audience. The show of force was followed by something far more intimate and unsettling. The images on the wall shifted, becoming deeply personal. Vec found himself staring at a perfect recreation of the spawning pools of his homeworld. The air suddenly filled with the scent of sulfur reeds and the sound of young Vorlagi chirping. It was a memory from his own mind, plucked and replayed with flawless fidelity. It was designed to soothe, to trigger an instinctual feeling of safety, and that made it a terrifying violation. This entity wasn't just in their ship. It was in their heads. The voice then spoke not through the comms, but directly into Vec's consciousness. It was not an audible sound, but a pure, clean stream of thought. Security Chief Vec, your service record is extensive. You have faced 18 confirmed life-or-death scenarios. Suddenly, the corridor around him dissolved. He was no longer on the Ark. He was back on the colony world of Xylos 7 years ago during the Takor uprising. Fire and smoke filled the air. He was trapped in a collapsed hab block, a support beam pinning his leg with 2 civilian hatchlings crying just beyond his reach. The Takor fire teams were closing in. In reality, he had saved one hatchling and the other had perished. It was the greatest failure of his career. But now, in this perfect simulation, the voice presented a new option. Your physical limitations are no longer a factor. Analyze the situation again. Vec saw it instantly. A ventilation shaft, too small for his physical body to fit through, but a perfect route to flank the enemy and rescue both children. It was a tactical solution he had never considered because it had been physically impossible. He understood then. This was a test, a psychological evaluation on a civilizational scale. The entity, Sanctuary, was not just displaying its power. It was meticulously studying them. It was analyzing their memories, their emotions, their instincts. It had presented him with his greatest failure and given him a path to success, not to be cruel, but to see what he would do. To gauge his capacity for creative problem-solving, his morality, his fundamental nature. Were the Vorlagi mindless brutes? Predictable merchants? Logical strategists? Sanctuary was running a diagnostic on his entire species, using him as the primary interface. He was no longer a soldier. He was a data point. The realization was more profound and terrifying than any weapon he had ever faced. These ancient ghosts were not just powerful. They were intelligent in a way he could barely begin to comprehend. Within the boundless, thriving metropolis of Sanctuary, the arrival of the Vorlagi data was like the opening of a floodgate. For millions of years, the million minds of the Odyssey had existed in a closed loop, Their only new information, the slow trickle of sensor readings from the void outside. Now in the subjective span of a few hours, they were inundated with the entire history, science, culture, and art of the Vorlagi Conglomerate and every species they had ever encountered. It was the greatest intellectual feast in their long history. Teams of specialized consciousnesses formed instantly. Linguists devoured the structure of 1,000 different languages. Sociologists analyzed the political structures of dozens of empires. Engineers and physicists absorbed millennia of technological advancement, finding much of it ingenious, but some of it laughably primitive. Dr. Eris Thorne found himself in a virtual observatory, surrounded by a swirling three-dimensional map of the known galaxy, constructed from the Vorlagi archives. With him were Alara, the cautious preservationist, and Kale, the bold expansionist. The data streaming around them formed new constellations, new trade routes, new galactic powers. They are remarkably simple, Alara observed. Her avatar a serene, graceful woman of light. The Vorlagi's entire civilization is based on a single, predictable algorithm: the acquisition of assets. They are a known quantity, manageable. Manageable? Alara, they are a key, Kale countered, his avatar a dynamic, powerfully built man whose form crackled with energy. They are our ticket out of this shell. Their trade routes, their networks, we can insert ourselves into their systems, spread our consciousness across this entire galaxy before they even know we are there. To what end, Kale? Eris asked quietly, his eyes focused on a distant, unremarkable cluster of stars in the Orion Arm. To become a bigger, faster version of what we already are? We are a culture, not a virus. Their debate was the echo of a conversation that had lasted for ages, now given new, urgent context. But as Eris and his team of historical analysts continued to sift through the data, cross-referencing ancient star charts with the Vorlagi's modern maps, they found something that silenced all other arguments. It began as a ghost, a series of fragmented, heavily redacted entries in the deep archives of a long-dead species the Vorlagi had absorbed. The entries spoke of a legendary system, dismissed by modern historians as a myth, a founding fable of a primitive race, a system with a single yellow star, 8 planets, and a shockingly biodiverse third world. The ancient name for the star, when translated through a dozen linguistic filters, was Sul. A profound collective silence fell over Sanctuary. They had found it, Earth, their home. A place that, to them, was a living memory, a core component of their simulated reality, but to the rest of the galaxy, was a forgotten myth. The records were sparse. The species that originated there, known only as humans, was listed as having gone extinct in a self-inflicted environmental cataclysm millennia before the rise of the Vorlagi or any of the current powers. They had never even achieved interstellar travel. The truth was a staggering, system-shocking revelation. They were not colonists who had lost their way. They were the sole surviving remnant of a species that the galaxy believed had died in its crib. The knowledge changed everything. Their philosophical debates about preservation versus expansion were suddenly rendered moot, replaced by a single, terrifying, and exhilarating question. They were alone. They were the last of their kind. What did they do now? The link to the Odyssey re-established without warning. Captain Xylar, who had been sitting in a state of rigid, anxious silence on his bridge, flinched as the ancient voice once again filled the air. His initial terror had subsided, replaced by the weary dread of a being awaiting a judgment it could not comprehend. He had handed over his civilization's entire collected knowledge to an entity of godlike power. He could only hope that it would honor its side of the bargain. Captain Xylar, the voice of Commander Jorik began, its tone as calm and dispassionate as ever. Our analysis is complete. Your archives have been most illuminating. A quiet chime sounded from Xylar's engineering console. The officer stationed there gasped. Captain, all systems are back online. Power is stable. Not only that, sir, our reactor efficiency just increased by 7%. The energy conduits have been rerouted along a far more logical pathway. Their AI, it optimized our ship. A gesture of goodwill, the voice explained. Payment for the information provided. We have copied your databases as per our agreement. We have also taken the liberty of purging a number of parasitic subroutines and viral agents that were degrading your system's performance. You should find your vessel functions more effectively now. The sheer casual arrogance of it was breathtaking. They had not only stolen all his data, they had tuned up his engine while they were at it. It was the ultimate power play, a demonstration that they saw his ship's technology as a simple, transparent toy. "We are releasing your vessel," the voice continued. "You will convey a message to the leaders of the Vorlagi Conglomerate. This vessel and the space it occupies are now a sovereign territory. We are not to be contacted, scanned, or approached. Any future incursion into our buffer zone will be met with immediate, non-physical disassembly. This is our only warning." Sylar could only nod, his vocal clicks failing him. "One last thing," the voice added. "Your return journey is long. The route your navigator has plotted is inefficient." A new file downloaded directly to the helm controls. A star chart, impossibly complex and elegant, appeared on the screen. "This is a more direct route, a solution to a multivariable FTL navigational problem that your species has yet to solve. It will allow you to transit a series of previously unknown microtunnels in subspace. Your journey home will now take 1/10 of the time." It was a gift, but it was also a final crushing statement of their superiority. Beck's voice suddenly crackled over the comm. "Captain, the blast doors. They're open. We are clear." "Helm," Sylar commanded, his voice a hoarse rasp. "Get us away. Now." The Prophet's grasp turned, its thrusters firing with a newfound, terrifying efficiency. Sylar took one last look at the Ark. It was as it had been, a dark, silent, tumbling piece of ancient debris. A ghost ship, a tomb. No one in the conglomerate would ever believe his report. They would think he had gone mad in the void, but he knew the truth. As the helm officer engaged the new FTL course, space twisting into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors, Sylar stared out at the receding ship. He had come to this empty quarter of the galaxy seeking profit, and had found a power that could remake the universe with a thought. His mission had failed, but he was the bearer of a message far more valuable than any salvage. A message that a million ghosts were dreaming in the dark between the galaxies, and they had just remembered the way home. The departure of the Prophet's grasp left a silence in its wake, both in the void outside and within the collective consciousness of Sanctuary. The Vorlagi vessel, now racing home with its impossible story, was a messenger, and its message would inevitably change the galaxy. But the data it had left behind had already shattered the foundations of the million minds aboard the Odyssey. They were not colonists journeying to a new home. They were the last ghosts of a dead species, the sole inheritors of a legacy the universe believed was a myth. Their entire purpose, the prime directive that had sustained them through eons of silent dreaming, was built on a lie. The journey was over before it had ever truly begun. The great forum of Sanctuary convened, not in debate, but in a state of profound communal shock. The factions that had defined their society for millennia found their philosophies rendered obsolete. Ilara, the leader of the preservationists, had long argued for isolation to protect their perfect society. Now, her argument held a new, desperate weight. "We are a legend," her avatar projected, her form shimmering with anxious light. "A biological impossibility. If the powers of this galaxy learn of our existence, we will become the ultimate prize. They will not see a civilization to be respected. They will see a miracle to be dissected, a power to be enslaved. We must take the Odyssey into the deepest void, where the echoes of even light cannot find us." Kyle, the fiery expansionist, countered with a renewed passion. His dream of spreading humanity's consciousness was no longer about simple growth. It was about reclamation. "We are not a prize to be captured. We are the heirs to an entire species. For millennia, the galaxy has believed we perished in our crib, a failed, primitive race. We have the power to correct the record with thunder and fire, to reveal ourselves, not as ghosts, but as the rightful masters of our own destiny. Let them come. They will learn to fear our name as they should have long ago." It was Dr. Eris Thorne who proposed the third path, a synthesis born from the new, startling reality. "Both of you are right," he addressed the forum, his calm, thoughtful presence a steadying influence. "To run is to accept a life of fear. To attack is to become the monsters the galaxy's histories might mistake us for. We are a myth, a legend. Let us, for now, remain one. The Vorlagi data gives us one point of reference in a galaxy of billions. it is not enough. He projected his idea for all to see, a plan not of physical expansion but of sensory extension. We have demonstrated our ability to manipulate matter and energy on a quantum level. Let us not build ships, but seeds. Microscopic self-replicating probes woven from the fabric of space-time itself. They will be undetectable, intangible. We can attach them to the ships of 1,000 species, ride the subspace currents to every corner of the galaxy. We will not be conquerors. We will become observers. We will see everything, learn everything. And when the time is right, when we have the complete picture, then we will decide how and when humanity rejoins the galactic stage. The logic was undeniable, a perfect compromise between caution and ambition. The million minds of Sanctuary reached a consensus. They would turn their home into the heart of the galaxy's greatest secret, a silent, invisible network of 1,000,000 watching eyes. When the Prophet's grasp arrived back at Vorlag Prime, the gleaming hyperdense capital of the conglomerate, it was not celebrated as a triumph but quarantined as an anomaly. Captain Xylar, haggard and fundamentally changed by his encounter, was immediately summoned before the High Board of Directors. In a sterile, intimidating chamber, surrounded by the 12 most powerful and ruthless merchants in the quadrant, he delivered his report. He presented the data with the detached precision of a good officer, the impossible age of the derelict, the flawless neutralization of his ship, the demonstration of atomic deconstruction, the perfectly optimized reactor, the revolutionary FTL solution that had brought them home in record time. He concluded with the entity's simple, stark warning: stay away. The board listened in utter silence, their multifaceted eyes betraying no emotion. When he was finished, a long, tense pause filled the room. Then Director Kress, the oldest and most influential of the board members, made a series of sharp, dismissive clicks. Captain Xylar, your record is exemplary, which is the only reason you are not being immediately decommissioned for psychological instability. You have encountered a powerful, presentient, automated defense system, a relic of some forgotten power. Your tired mind, stressed from a long and fruitless mission, has anthropomorphized it into a ghost story. Director, with respect, Xylar countered, holding his ground. An automated system does not have conversations. It does not display a sense of irony. It does not repair and optimize your ship as a gesture of goodwill. Another director, a young, ambitious female named Riza, leaned forward. You are missing the point, Director Kress. It matters not what it is. What matters is what it can do. This relic houses a power source that can deconstruct matter at will. It possesses computational abilities that make our best research divisions look like hatchlings playing with counting beads. This is not a threat. It is the single greatest asset this conglomerate has ever discovered. Her words shifted the entire tone of the meeting. The fear and disbelief in the room were consumed by a far more powerful fundamental Vorlagi emotion: greed. Xylar watched in horror as the debate turned from the nature of the entity to the most efficient method of its acquisition. His warnings were cast aside, dismissed as the timid bleating of a captain who had lost his nerve. The board did not see a sovereign civilization to be respected. They saw a treasure chest waiting to be cracked open. The decision was swift and unanimous. They would not heed the warning. They would seize the asset. A fleet was to be assembled in secret, the largest military force the conglomerate had ever mustered. It would be equipped with a new experimental class of weapon: quantum disruption, torpedoes, designed specifically to destabilize complex energy fields and computational matrices. They would not attempt to communicate or negotiate. They would strike with overwhelming force, contain the power source, and tow the entire derelict back to Vorlag Prime for disassembly and reverse engineering. Xylar was formally silenced, his report classified under penalty of death. He was a hero who had discovered the greatest treasure in the galaxy, and his reward was to watch as his people, blinded by avarice, prepared to march into the den of a sleeping god. For a subjective eternity within Sanctuary, the galaxy had been a flood of information. The echo probes, microscopic and undetectable, had spread like pollen on the stellar winds, carrying the senses of 1,000,000 minds to the far corners of the cosmos. They saw empires rise and fall in the blink of an eye. They learned the secret histories of 1,000 species, their philosophies, their fears, their art. They witnessed acts of breathtaking kindness and horrifying brutality. They learned that the galaxy was not a simple collection of powers, but a complex, chaotic, and beautiful ecosystem of life. And through the probes that had attached themselves to the ships in the Vorlagi home fleet, they watched a war being planned against them. Eris Thorn stood with Commander Jorik in the Sentinel's primary command center, a virtual space known as the Observatory. Around them, countless data streams coalesced into a perfect, real-time simulation of the approaching Vorlagi armada. They saw the schematics for the quantum disruption torpedoes. They analyzed their energy signatures, their theoretical yields, their delivery mechanisms. They knew the fleet's exact composition, its chain of command, its precise vector of attack. The Vorlagi believed they were preparing a surprise attack. In reality, they were the most perfectly observed military force in the history of the universe. The findings were presented to the Forum. The evidence was irrefutable. The Vorlagi were coming not to talk but to conquer. Kyle the Expansionist was the first to speak, his avatar burning with righteous fury. The time for observation is over. They have made their choice. We must make ours. A preemptive strike. We can unravel their fleet now from light years away. We can turn their starships into dust and their crews into memories. Let the first message humanity sends to this galaxy be a clear and final one. We are not to be trifled with. Ilara the Preservationist countered, her voice trembling with fear. And what will that accomplish, Kale? You will prove that we are the monsters they fear we are. It will unite the entire galaxy against us. No, the only logical path is the one we have always known. We must run. We must take the Odyssey into the intergalactic dark and never look back. Our survival is all that matters. The million minds were divided. To strike was to become a tyrant. To flee was to become a coward. Eris Thorn stepped into the center of the Forum, his simple, calm avatar a stark contrast to the burning fury of Kale and the shimmering fear of Ilara. There is a third path, he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. We are human, and for all our flaws we have never been simple. We are not gods to pass judgment, and we are not animals to scurry away in fear. The Vorlagi are coming to us with weapons because weapons are all they understand. We will not respond with greater weapons. We will respond with a greater understanding. We will not commit an act of war. We will perform an act of education. He turned to Jorik, the stoic Sentinel commander. We will not destroy them. We will not run from them. We will disarm them. And then, we will teach them why they were wrong. A new consensus, a truly human one, rippled through Sanctuary. The Sentinels were given their directive: absolute defense. Minimal harm, maximum enlightenment. The Vorlagi Armada, a breathtaking assembly of more than 500 warships and heavy cruisers, tore a hole in subspace and emerged into the dead void where the Odyssey waited. The Ark hung before them exactly as Captain Xylar had described. Silent, dark, and appearing for all the world like a piece of drifting junk. Fleet Commander Graz, a veteran of a dozen corporate wars, sneered from the bridge of his flagship, the Asset Acquirer. Xylar was a fool. This was no god, just a relic. All ships, Graz broadcast, his voice dripping with condescending authority. Deploy the containment projectors. Target the derelict's core. On my mark, fire all quantum disruption torpedoes. Across the fleet, massive energy projectors hummed to life, weaving a net of crackling energy around the Ark. Torpedo bays opened, revealing the sleek, menacing forms of the conglomerate's newest and most powerful weapons. Mark, Graz commanded. The moment the command was given, the instant the Vorlagi's intent was translated from thought into action, Sanctuary responded. It was not an attack. It was an edit. All at once, the entire Vorlagi fleet went dead. There was no explosion, no flash of light. It was a change on a fundamental conceptual level. From within the observatory, a million minds worked as one, their thoughts reaching out and rewriting the reality of the Armada. Aboard the Asset Acquirer, Commander Graz stared in stunned disbelief as his weapons console melted into a puddle of inert, shimmering liquid which then reformed itself into a perfect, beautiful sculpture of a flowering plant he'd never seen before. Across the fleet, the same miracle occurred. The barrels of massive energy cannons were transmuted, their purpose instantly and irrevocably altered. They became telescopes, their focusing arrays now aimed at the distant, beautiful nebulae of deep space. The quantum disruption torpedoes filled with reality-bending energies were rendered inert. Their warheads were transformed into self-contained seed banks, each one holding the complete genome of every extinct species from the planet Earth. The ship's powerful reactors were not destroyed, but converted into sustainable life support systems, capable of feeding their crews for centuries. Their navigation systems, once capable of plotting attack vectors, were wiped and replaced with a single, locked destination: Vorlag Prime. The fleet had been gelded. They were no longer warships. They were the galaxy's most heavily armed convoy of greenhouses and libraries. And then came the lesson. Every screen, every speaker, every communication device on every ship in the fleet came to life. It did not show a threat. It broadcast a story, the story of humanity. They were shown the art of Rembrandt, the music of Beethoven, the writings of Plato. They were shown the quiet courage of a parent teaching a child, the selfless bravery of a doctor healing the sick, the boundless curiosity of a scientist looking at the stars. They were also shown the mistakes, the wars, the greed, the pollution, the final, tragic ecological collapse that had turned their homeworld into a myth. The crippled, disarmed, and profoundly educated fleet was then released, their journey home beginning automatically. The conglomerate would receive its fleet, and with it, a message more powerful than any weapon. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not extinct. It had simply been dreaming. On the Odyssey, in the heart of Sanctuary, Eris stood with Jorik, Alara, and Kale, looking at the star chart that now glittered with the light of their million probes. They were no longer colonists. They were no longer ghosts. The void was not an enemy to be conquered or a darkness to flee from. It was a neighborhood. What now? Kale asked, his bravado gone, replaced by a quiet awe. Eris zoomed the star chart in, past the great powers and the established empires, to a single, unremarkable point of light in the Orion Arm. A yellow star, orbited by a tiny blue-green world that the galaxy had long forgotten.
Now, Eris said, a faint smile on his face, we go home and read our own story.